And now, you're tuned into RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Good evening, and when you're hearing this, good morning or possibly good day to all the Rowdies fans out there in the world. This is James Knowles coming at you from the RBLR Sports podcast and the RBLR Rowdies beat. I am here with my usual co-host, Leo. Leo, I ask every week, how are you doing?
And every week I say I'm having a good day. So thanks for asking, James. How you doing yourself?
You know, not too bad. I am excited this week because after, a couple of very good interviews, I guess Eureka, our producer, just decided to keep the party going, and he set up another very good interview for us. So we are going to get into that very quickly here. Before that, I just want to say last week we did have Mike Pendleton on to discuss, among some other things, Detroit City coming into the USL Championship. So if you have not listened to that, please go back and listen to it. It was a great interview. I learned a ton of stuff, and if you don't know exactly what the deal is with Detroit City, then I think that you will learn a ton of stuff too. Please, of course, as well, follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook. You can like and subscribe to our podcast on all major podcast platforms. And now let's get into our interview. That is with John Morrissey at USL Tactics on Twitter. Hello, John. How are you doing today?
Yeah, doing really well. I always go with the long-time listener, first-time caller line, so I'll throw that in here, but really excited to chat.
Awesome. Well, I am glad that we were able to have you on because much like the previous two interviews that we did, I feel like this is going to be not only a very good conversation, but again, I think that we are going to learn quite a bit here because, you are the guy who apparently is the guru, not just for everyone on Twitter, but even for the Rowdies coaching staff. So I'm just going to go ahead and get into my first question here because it is, a pretty basic one for what we're doing. But what is your background in soccer and how did you get into tactics specifically as a medium?
So maybe 2010, 2014 World Cups were really kind of the starting point for me in terms of the soccer fandom. I played casually, but really never past like the grade school level. And Lord knows I was not very good. But I always had the eye for this statistical side of things with sports, especially big into baseball, big into fantasy baseball, especially. And so as I got into soccer a little bit with those World Cups, I started following Tottenham Hotspur. And I actually come from Indianapolis. So right around the time that you're getting those sorts of sparks for me, the Indy 11 come about. And I become a big fan of them. And actually the first game I ever went to was, funnily enough, against the Tampa Bay Rowdies.
Oh, nice.
But so that kind of got my interest in the sport going. And I have just a tendency as a person, when I get interested in something, I deep dive it about as hard as I possibly can. And with soccer, that really turned into the tactical side of things, where I was trying to read as much as I could, just seeking out random German blog posts or the stuff that Michael Cox or Matt Doyle were putting out, if either of those names ring a bell.
Oh yeah,
and
definitely.
So then, sure. Right, yeah, exactly. They're the best out there, and I feel like I learned a ton just trying to kind of see what they were putting out. And so you get to the pandemic. At this point, I'm a college student who's coming back home, kind of trapped in a house for a while, and I figure, hey, I know a little bit about the tactical side of things, and I'm pretty good working my way around Excel. Maybe I throw out a Twitter account, post some things breaking down this sport because people seem interested in that and no one's really servicing that in a league-wide manner for the USL. And over the past year and a half, it's really just taken off from there.
Yeah, so I have another question related to that, and then I'll give the floor over to Leo. But beforehand, I wanted to ask if you could expand how you got into the process of actually blogging about that and then going on to Twitter, I guess, and making that, something that you actually became known for. And then if you could give us, the information related to how you got onto, actually working with the Rowdies staff through that.
Sure. So it was that stretch where the league went on hiatus in 2020 it would have been, where just those couple of weeks, I kind of familiarized myself with the native video capturing that just comes innate to any Microsoft laptop. and I downloaded a bunch of the data from like your Football Reference type of website and from the USL website. So armed with a spreadsheet and the most basic video editing possible, I kind of just started clipping matches. The first game I did was that comeback match. It was like Louisville against Pittsburgh or something, debuting the stadium. So just like capturing a couple clips of like Canardo Forbes playing a through ball and commenting on that. And it went from there. And so we get to the end of the year, and I've picked up a decent bit of a following at this point. Really thanks to like a couple of like Louisville bloggers who kind of hit on it when I was posting analyses, that sort of thing, where like on a team by team basis you get a passionate fan or two who spreads it, and suddenly like I'm blowing up in Tulsa or something like that.
You gotcha.
And so yeah, you get to the end of the year, and at some point in time, well, let me back up for just a second, in that I think, and both of the years I've really done it, the playoffs have been really like the biggest time of expansion for me, where I'm doing pretty deep dives into every single one of the games and getting a lot of attention for it. Well, at some point, Coach Collins in Tampa clearly was made party to one of those posts, and he had just DM'd me to say like, hey, this is pretty good content. I really appreciate what you're doing out there. Just a pretty boilerplate. I really appreciated it because, I mean, that's just super cool for me as a rather casual kind of person to get that kind of message. And then a couple months later, as the season was coming closer, Neil reached out again on Twitter and said, hey, here's my number. Would you mind giving me a call? And I really had no idea what he intended. But yeah, he just basically said that they were looking to add someone on the sort of statistical side of things to give them like a weekly scouting report of who the opponent would be. They'd had an intern in a similar sort of position each of the last 2 summers. And so every week, or for every match rather, I would just come with maybe 20 to 30 slide little PowerPoint trying to break down what the opponent would try to be doing, coming in with the tactics, supporting that with the numbers. And then towards the end of the year, I did a little bit of scouting for possible signings for the offseason as well.
That's I mean, I can't imagine a coach giving me their number and then like expecting them to get in touch with me. I would expect maybe Neil Collins might want to yell at me for the stuff that we've talked about. But I'll turn it over to Leo here for a question that you had lined up.
Yeah, first of all, if a coach ever gave me their number, I would check the calendar and make sure it's not April 1st to make sure I'm not getting put on or anything. But yeah, so I want to start out, John. Would you consider pursuing a career in color commentating? Because I know you have all the skills to knock down certain tactics against oppositions, against other teams, and we do know color commentating in the broadcasting world. It's usually the color commentators that really dig into the tactics, what's really going on. They read the game better. And from what you're saying so far, like color commentating is what I think whenever you talk about tactics and stuff like that. And also you're working with the Rowdies coaching staff, but is that something that you considered that a career you might be interested in pursuing?
So I've got some form of the like, would you want to pursue XYZ career in a lot of different forms, and I actually have like a job lined up like outside of the soccer realm. I'm a senior in college right now. And like that's what the focus is for now. And I kind of see a lot of it as a hobbyist type of thing. Mm-hmm. I've often considered the idea of like trying to get into more of the journalism thing. Like the ultimate pipe dream would be like working for The Athletic or something like that. But I've never really thought about the idea of color commentary. And I don't think of myself as someone who's particularly quick on their feet in terms of that sort of thing. But I mean, it sounds like an absolute blast and something that I would really enjoy trying. I just was having a conversation with Gary Bailey last week. He does some of the games for USL headquarters, I think, and he does the coverage on BN of the leagues that they have. And he was sort of just picking my brain about the numbers, but he's like, I mean, he was like a 300 appearance guy for Manchester United, like multiple England caps. So like and he's doing color commentary now, so to have that perspective versus like what have I done in terms of soccer is just funny to think about. But yeah, I mean, it certainly would be fun.
Yeah, well, hopefully, hopefully the stars align and you just pursue whatever you want to. But getting into the Rowdies more, how do you see the new, obviously the latest additions for the Rowdies fitting in? Do you think they fit into Neo's current tactics, or do you see some kind of change that he's gonna have to make?
So I'm definitely thinking that the tactical system is largely going to stay the same based on what I've seen
Hmm.
so far.
So you think like a
Um,
3-5-2 will stay the same?
Absolutely. And I
Mhm.
think the biggest hint of that has been the Mel edition. He played in that sort of very like high pressing back three system in
Mhm.
Loudon. He's going to fit like a glove into this Tampa back line. Jake, who just came in, he really can play as that left wing back sort of player and let Leo Fernandez get higher up if Leo ends up coming back. He can also fit into that more creative central midfield role. Like think about the Lewis Hilton type of game. And
Mhm.
then Etu can be the sort of destroyer. So just based on those additions, like they fit naturally into the roles that you've seen this Tampa team kind of use in the past. So I'm not expecting any sort of major systematic changes.
Mhm. And you mentioned him already, but Timmy Mel, do you believe is a good replacement for Forrest Lasso, who obviously announced that he will no longer be with the club?
I think Mel gives you a little bit of a different game style. They're similar in that they really can both be the anchor in the middle of a back line, sort
Mhm.
of do it in different ways, where Lasso obviously is probably the best aerial threat there is in terms of a central defender in this league. Mel is good in that sense, but he's not dominant. He's better in terms of positioning himself, relying on some of the sneaky athleticism he has to just put himself in the best possible spot to intervene. And in that Loudon side, they tried to press kind of high up the pitch, but they lacked the skill, the discipline, what have you, and were often blown by. So Mel really showed an ability to control counterattacks and organize a defense in a way that's reminiscent of Lasso. So I think he can be a pretty good replacement for it, if not the same style of player, like in every single kind of way.
Mhm. Yeah, I like how you mentioned how he has some kind of athleticism to his game, something that in all respect to Forrest Lasso, he was just really that anchor in the back and someone who just a really strong, classic center back you used to see back in the day. But moving on, who do you envision, for the Rowdies to go after now that they've signed, a few players already and added to their roster for the upcoming season?
I mean, right now, I'm just trying to think about some of the players who haven't been re-signed or
Yeah,
announced as
like
being
what positions
re-signed
do you
yet.
think the Rowdies would most likely look forward to strengthening?
Boy, okay, so if I'm thinking about this team, I'm probably looking to the wingback spot or the striker spot, and
Mhm.
that's nothing against. I mean, you're like Dos Santos or Guenzati. Just having that additional depth. There's not like there's only so many more years for me that like a lucky Nkosana can continue to do it as a super sub. Just getting another player in there that I mean maybe it lets you put a Guenzati deeper in a more creative role. It frees you a little bit tactically to be more creative. In
Mhm.
terms of that wing back spot, obviously you've added on the left, but just given some of the changes you've seen at the right-sided role there, I'm just looking for another player to come in, add the kind of threat, but like, or maybe it's more of like a Dayon Harris glow up type of thing. The thing with this Tampa side is that there really aren't that many holes to begin with, where like you could just run back most of what this team was in 2021 and be at the top of the league once again and be probably my favorite. So it's kind of like a fool's errand to say, oh, you need to add XYZ. But yeah, I think as yeah, a striker or a right wing back would maybe
Mhm.
be the spots I'm looking at the most.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that the XYZ is already at the Rowdies. They don't really have to add anything too
Yeah,
special.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, so speaking about these kind of teams, obviously, the Rowdies and the Louisvilles of the league, they're obviously at a level compared to, we look at other teams who are still trying to take that leap to be on the same level. So how do you see the rest of the USL shaping up, their teams to defeat the Rowdies or the Louisvilles of the league or even the Phoenix Risings of the league?
Sure. Yeah, I actually just this weekend did a piece on sort of power ranking where teams are at in the off season.
Mhm.
Is anybody that in terms of what they've added that I'm really thinking of as a threat, I would point to Miami and Colorado Springs. So Miami basically just kind of rated everything good about Memphis so far. So they added Kyle Murphy as a striker. He was somewhere near 20 goals probably, but the thing for me is he's just brilliant in terms of hold up play, and he's a really smart mover. He had some time in Tampa, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, he did.
And I don't think he impressed me in the same way that he did with Memphis last year, but he's going to be brilliant on top of things for Miami. And then Miami also took Mark Segbers, the right back from Memphis. He's basically the best player in that position in the league. So good offensively. I mean, can basically be as good as any winger out there. So they're going to be strong. Pittsburgh's retained their core, and if not for that weird COVID thing that they had at the end of the year, I think they would have been a threat in the playoffs. And then just looking to Colorado Springs out west, they're bringing back the MVP in Haji Berry, and they've rated basically every other good team in that conference in terms of getting talent. They've added like Carlton Belmar out of Sacramento. They brought back Michigan Galena after he left for LAFC. Cam Lindley is going to be a really good creative presence in the middle for them. Malik Johnson, who, of course, Rowdies fans would know, is going to be really good in their back line. They've got so much depth at this point compared to really any other side that I have them honestly alongside Phoenix as the top contender in that side of things in the USL.
So what I'm hearing is that, to get better in this league, you got to take the best players from one team and you should be fine.
Honestly, not a bad strategy.
All right, I'll turn it over to James. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple more questions that are a little more broad than the Rowdies because, as much as we could pick your brain all day, I think that we'll also see some of your stuff when it comes out on Twitter. But for people who are interested in tactics, I had a question about, what recommendations, other than yourself, of course, do you have for people who would like to, build their base of knowledge?
For me, it's two things. I think the reading and staying abreast of where things are at is an important aspect of it. So just seek out like articles about tactics, whether they're about the USL or not. And as I know, most of them are not about the USL. So like try to read things by like Michael Cox. I think he's with The Athletic now. Try to read, there's a website called like Spielverlagerung, which is super high level.
Oh yeah,
intense.
That's right.
Yeah, like just try to find any sort of resource like that that's explaining the concepts of the game. I'm trying to think of the author. Jonathan Wilson, if you know, Inverting the Pyramid is like the classic like soccer nerd book.
You know what's funny is I'm literally reading that right now to try and beef myself up for the upcoming season.
Yeah, like, and I mean, so much of it is like Hungary playing the 2-3-5 in 1910 or whatever, but the context you get from that is just enriching, I think. But in terms of really trying to apply these sort of things, it comes down to watching the games in an intelligent sort of way where you're not just focused on what's happening on the ball. You're trying to see like what shape is a team trying to keep, where are they trying to prevent opponents from getting to. So like, are you cutting off the passing lanes into the middle? What sort of things are triggering the press? It's just focusing on everything that's not like at the top of mind that really keeps you engaged mentally. And over the course of watching multiple matches, you start to pick up on trends. You start to see habits that a certain team or a certain player has. And I think it just enriches the tactical experience for you as a viewer.
Gotcha. I will have to incorporate that myself. Like I said, I am reading that book, and I do love listening to Michael Cox. He's on the Athletics Football Tactics podcast. So that is one that I have. Yeah, that's one that I have been listening to recently in a similar effort. So my next question then is about your preference for tactics here, and I want to know like who are your favorite clubs, your maybe national teams, managers, all that kind of stuff. If that is at the USL Championship level, maybe it is in Europe or South America or somewhere else in the world. Like I said, maybe it's a national team. Who are your favorites out there?
Yeah, well, as someone who kind of, as I mentioned, got into the sport following Tottenham a little bit, Mauricio Pochettino is one for me who I just really like the style of game that he brings to the table. It's positive in that there's the pressure, there's a focus on really trying to engage your attacking players in a meaningful way. There's a commitment to trying to possess the ball. It's the kind of things that you hear about a lot, but they really make for a more enjoyable watch and they set you up for success. And I think if there's not an exact echo of that, but in terms of like the USL level of things, Mark Lowry and the teams that he coaches are always a real joy for me. Tampa would have played against him going back to the NASL against the Jacksonville sides he had, but he's really flourished with El Paso in the past couple of years. And what he really tries to do is counterpress you and possess the ball and just stay in that final third constantly, keep up the pressure in a way that forces opponents to make mistakes close to their own net. And now with him moving to Indy and like having that Indy 11 background where I try to stay as neutral as I possibly can, but like having a manager I love at a team I'm partial to is a joy for me. I think just to sort of pivot a little bit, something that's really been enriching for me in the past couple of years and months has been getting into hockey, where you wouldn't necessarily expect the similarities or like the tactical lessons you can get from applying other sports, whether that is like a hockey or a basketball. But with hockey specifically, the idea of like keeping the offensive zone or trying to possess as close to the other team's goal as possible, just trying to adapt other approaches that you're seeing more broadly than like your soccer specific preferences has been something that I've just found to be an interesting practice.
Huh. I used to be into hockey, like to the point of collecting a whole big Topps card collection back before like roughly around 2000. But I never considered how I could apply that to soccer when I got more into soccer overall. So I suppose that is something that I should possibly try to revisit. But my last question here, and then I think Leo had a couple more related to the Rowdies. And a couple new signings actually, but my one other one is you obviously have a not a new project necessarily, but you are part of the USL show now. So how do you see that going for the upcoming year? And do you have any other projects that you are looking to try and bring online, so to speak?
Yeah, so in terms of the USL show, they had a pretty long-term set of hosts, panelists, whatever you want to term them, who, for whatever reason, were just getting busy with life, or that they had their team that they supported fold in terms of the USL.
Yeah.
And so they were looking for the transition. And they got, Kayla and myself involved fairly early in the process of trying to figure out what direction where things would go. And so, yeah, the past couple of weeks, we've kind of been handing over the reins. I was able to get on to one show a couple weeks ago, and I missed our second episode, but it'll be just a regular facet. Every week we'll try to convene like the big 6-man panel, talk about the latest in the championship. But I think beyond that, there's really a renewed commitment to trying to cover the whole expanse of what USL is at that point. It is at this point. So it's inclusive of discussions of League One, trying to get to the women's game, which is really a burgeoning side of things for the league. And in addition to that, trying to put out a little bit more regular content that's more casual, easier to consume. I don't know if anyone's familiar with like the John Boy baseball kind of coverage where you'll get like our rankings thing on YouTube, or just kind of sillier, more accessible, and maybe interactive types of content. And then in terms of my personal side of things, I think most people are aware at this point of like the various kind of spreadsheet things I do. Like I had the Playoff Hub, and it's in lieu of a USL transfer tracker. I'm keeping one of those up now. I'll have a big season preview as I did last year that I'll be pushing out. But the big statistical project for me is trying to do a projection model for the standings where I publish the like goals above replacement, which is similar to a baseball wins above replacement. And trying to adapt that to the USL to put out at least a semi-respectable prediction. And it's more of just a pet project where like I don't expect anything too accurate to come of that. But just the process of it will be fun for me, and hopefully we'll produce something halfway meaningful.
Nice. Well, I look forward to all of those. I think that those are super interesting things to take on too. But yeah, I will. I will definitely be keeping an eye out for them. And I will pass it back to you, Leo. Go ahead with your questions for John.
Yes, sir. Thank you, James. So, John, I know we already talked about Mel, but in regards to Jake Everman, Junior at 2, how do you think? What are your initial thoughts about each player? And also, how do you think the younger players who got re-signed, such as Deion Harris and Adebayo Smith, how do you think they would do heading into the 2022 season?
Yeah, so I'll start with the Charlotte contingent. I'm not quite as familiar with A2, and I think that's because he didn't really get a ton of game time. He strikes me as more of like your really pure defensive midfielder kind of guy. He's high energy, not the greatest passer in the world or the most skillful, but he can go in and do a job. He almost is like a more raw Jordan Doherty maybe, but I see him more as a substitute, if anything, within this side. But Jake Ehrman really is a special player. I posted like a fawning Twitter thread about him the other day.
Yeah.
He gives you so much creatively. He can do it from multiple spots on the pitch. He played a lot on that left side of the wingback role for Charlotte in their back three last year, and he could obviously pick up that exact same position for Tampa, but he's equally adept in the middle of the pitch. A good work rate. He's not the most active defender necessarily, but he knows how to intervene, and he will position himself with the utmost intelligence. And it's that creativity that really sets him apart at the end of the day. He is so skillful. He's a really great passer, really great vision, and the way he can progress things, I think I mentioned it earlier, is very reminiscent of like a Lewis Hilton. So I think he's going to slot in wonderfully. And then just to slide over to the young players, I would say sort of in the same vein as that too, where I'm not quite as familiar with what Adebayo Smith brings to the table. And frankly, I don't know how much playing time he gets this season, but I think he's bright. He brings a lot of energy to the game, and I'm excited to see what he will do if he does get some more playing time. But Harris, really, he is someone who I think could make a big step this year. He's obviously like lightning quick. He gives you so much energy out on that right wing, but he can also play as more of a forward who's just going to stretch a back line, drag defenders out of position, and put them in jail a little bit. I'm looking for him to grow in terms of some of the passing and the crossing, where he can put a ball in, but it's lacking some of that precision. So if he can get a little bit more technical to add to that like natural spark that he brings, I think he could be a huge contributor and one of the like most improved players across the league for this upcoming year.
Yeah, speaking of Deion Harris, I know in previous episodes, James and I have talked about his potential and how he played that kind of super sub role within this team due to injuries and the form with Sebastian Dalgard and Connor Antley. His time was limited, but James and I would discuss how whenever he stepped on the field, he just provided a different kind of aspect and dynamic towards the team with his pace. But assuming that Harris does take that next step in 2022, do you think this might mean that Leo Fernandez could be moved into that number 10 position, that central attacking mid position that we've seen him play a few times last season due to injuries, where Neil Collins had to implement him more into that number 10 role?
Yeah, I definitely think that could be the case. And I think the beauty of like Harris really blossoming into a more complete player and the addition of a guy like Jake Ehrman is that you have so much flexibility. So I think the plan probably is to use Fernandez more in that central kind of position. But at the same time, like if for whatever reason it gets stale, if teams start to really key on him, you can just slide everyone around, have Fernandez go back to that kind of left-sided role. He's so dynamic, Fernandez, in that he can give you a ton in terms of that creativity and that kind of gumption out wide. He is he can fulfill that number 10 spot because he's an excellent passer. He's so tight in terms of his ball control and dribbling, where he can put a ton of pressure on a defense. Just to speak to that initial point, like with the addition of these kind of wing back guys, I do see him playing a bit more centrally.
Yeah, I think one thing we also got to expect is that hopefully he does re-sign with the Rowdies, because he hasn't been announced yet as a player being re-signed. So hopefully it does happen. But moving on, we talked about the players that the Rowdies signed and who they re-signed, but of the players who have already signed elsewhere, for example, Dane Kelly, he joined the Pittsburgh Riverhounds. That was announced a few weeks back. Do you think there are some players that the Rowdies did miss out on potentially strengthening this team that's already pretty strong?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I would sort of point to the goalkeeper position a little bit. With Evan Laura leaving, there's obviously a hole there. And it's not that I don't trust a Rosarena to step up into the spot in those starter minutes. But when you see like Logan Ketterer, who I adore, being let go by El Paso, Jeff Caldwell being snatched up by Colorado Springs, there have been a lot of really high-end goalkeepers out there, and Tampa kind of passed on all of them. So that's sort of a spot where I could have seen this side strengthen a bit. And then likewise, when you've seen some of the talent, like the Dane Kelly you mentioned, or Enzo Martinez from Charlotte ending up in Birmingham, where it's the double whammy of he's moving, like he was a free agent and you could have picked him up, but then he's going to one of your key rivals within the conference. Like that bites for sure. In terms of like filling out the back line, just given the exit of a Forrest Lasso, you could have seen like Kyle Adams, who just moved to San Diego and will probably play in a back three there. Someone like a Meshach Jerome from El Paso who moved over to Indy. There's just a couple of players who maybe not perfect fits or maybe not the most needed things in the world, where they could have just been nice, like icing on the cake for the Rowdies, but more importantly would have prevented rivals from really getting stronger.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is my last question for you, John. So I do custom tactics on FIFA 22. I don't know if you're a video gamer yourself, but so I have an ultimate team on there, and if I do say so myself, I think I'm pretty good. But obviously in the world of video games, obviously e-gaming and esports is becoming very popular. There's professional gamers out there now. Is this something you think you'll be interested into? Like transitioning your tactics skills to on the field soccer, to maybe seeing how that could some way or some form translate to a virtual side, or a football manager kind of game, or FIFA kind of games for these professional gamers?
So just like to give a little background, I was a pretty prolific FIFA player from FIFA 12 to maybe 17 or 18. And the tactical system in that game just flummoxed me every single time, because the AI of the players, like off the ball, who you aren't controlling, they're just brain dead. Like they're not moving at all. I could go on, but it's a source of frustration for me for sure. But I've kind of been off the gaming train a little bit. And you would expect, just given like where my interests lie, that I would be a total nerd for Football Manager, right? And I played like one iteration of it, and hilariously, like I found it way too dense. Like it's just too much of a commitment, given that like I'm nerding out on tactics already, so it's kind of doubling down on the same thing, if that makes sense. That said, I actually had a member of the FM team that makes it reach out to say like that they wanted my help in terms of like providing player ratings for the USL guys, which was the trippiest thing in the world. So like the
That's
idea
awesome.
Something I would be doing when they like contributed to a game. But nothing has come of that yet. But I'm hoping I'm gonna follow up on it, because it just seems like a total blast.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It seems something that I think anyone would be into, giving FIFA ratings or a Football Manager ratings for any league or any player. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, no doubt.
John, I appreciate everything that you have said and taken the time to be with us here tonight, and talk about all sorts of different things, including e-gaming or esports. And I love the conversation that we had. Like the other ones, as I predicted, I have learned a ton, and I know that I've got some more reading to do. But we also know that you're pressed for time, so we'll let you get out of here for get back to what you were doing, and we'll finish our podcast here. But thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and go over all that stuff tonight.
Yeah, of course, my pleasure. And feel free to reach out at any point if you need a guest.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we might just have to do that. But yeah, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, John, for your time. Obviously talking about FIFA and stuff like that. It was really fun and just a really, really overall good conversation. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you guys a ton.
So with John's conversation now complete, and it was a very good one, of course, but we are going to move into our last segment here. That is our One More Thing segment, and we actually have more than one more thing to cover, but we're going to get into it here. Just so everyone knows, we still have a couple weeks to go before we can actually get into discussing what the Rowdies are doing. Obviously, we would like to fill that time. So if you have any topics you want us to cover this offseason, please let us know. And we would be happy to do that. Leo, I think that we have a shop now that we need to tell everybody about. RBLR does have a shop. It is shop.rblrsports.com. Liking and subscribing to the podcast is obviously free, and we encourage everyone to do that. But if you think that you might be able to use some new clothes or anything along the lines to show your support, please go there and check out the designs that we have up. We have a new one as of yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, on the Bucks side. And if you check our description, there is a link with the promo code COYR for 10% off. So yeah, that's pretty cool if you would like to get a discount on some cool RBLR stuff. But we've got some new additions to the Rowdies to discuss as well here. So Leo, I'll let you take that for the new assistant coaches and some new signings. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is exactly what you're hearing, James. So yeah, so we got new assistant coaches. John Stead and Eric Wild are in. James, I don't know if you're familiar with these people, but assuming Neil Collins, obviously we have two assistant coaches that left earlier, and I feel like Neil Collins would kind of want to bring some like for like kind of assistant coaches for his staff, to make sure they all share the same vision, and that way, to ensure that the Rowdies do go on another successful season that they had last season. So I'm pretty sure the coaches coming in probably see eye to eye with Neil Collins, and hopefully, all things work out for the best. And in regards to new signings, obviously we already mentioned some with the interview with John, but Timmy Mel was announced, and so was Jake Artman. He's also in, and also Junior Ithu is in. So we got great signings coming in, but also we had a couple signings. No, not a couple signings leaving, but we did have a player announce his departure from the club today, and that is Forrest Lasso. Someone who was probably special to a lot of Rowdies fans. The reigning USL Defender of the Year for 2 years in a row, back-to-back consecutive, and someone who I got to interview, face-to-face, someone I got to work with, really, really close, and, learned a lot about his impact off the field. And he was just a great guy, it was just really overall great player and also a great person off the field, and someone I wish all Rowdies fans had the opportunity to meet him. And I remember going to games, James, where win or lose, he would always be the first one at the stands, high-fiving the kids, high-fiving the fans, signing signs, taking pictures, whatever you want. He was always there for the fans because, he really was a player playing for the club. So with all that being said, I just wish the best for Forrest Lasso, and I know he's going to play in Sweden. So best of luck to him in Europe. I heard it does get cold over there, so I hope he did pack some a lot of jackets, a lot of coats. But best of luck to Forrest Lasso wherever he goes. But we should be excited for his new signings coming in, as John in the conversation broke it down for us. Jake Artman is probably the most excited signing we've had to make yet in the offseason. Hopefully we get a couple more. I'm pretty sure we will. Hopefully we do get some more re-signings from the squad last season. But like always, whenever that comes in, we'll let you guys know when it does.
Yeah, and I am pretty excited about those signings, just as John went through what their strengths and weaknesses are. And just like you said, I think Jake Artman is a player that I am very excited about. He was somebody that I was pretty impressed by when we played Charlotte. Every time we were out there, he was a thorn in our side, and I'm happy that he will be a thorn for us in other people's sides moving forward. That's going to make things a lot better. But to give a little bit more background on John Stead, I know that he did play with Neil Collins previously. So, they have that relationship going back and forth. I know that will obviously speak to that same, seeing eye to eye thing that you had mentioned with them. And Eric Wild is from, I believe, Forward Madison. He was an assistant there, and they are a USL League One team. So they are in the tier below the Rowdies. But, he does come with a background in that area, obviously. Timmy Mel is, he's coming from Loudoun United. Loudoun is a team that we beat pretty handily last year, but we could say we kicked something for Loudoun United. But I don't think most of that was down to Timmy Mel. I think that he was the player out there who was probably showing the best, because unfortunately it was just a team filled with a bunch of mostly academy players. And, if that's what a bunch of grown men are going up against, then it's most likely that the grown men are going to win in that case. But yeah, I think that Timmy Mel was doing very well for himself. And the last one, Junior Eto, I did like what I saw of him for Charlotte. He was, like John said, kind of a bulldog player. And I think that he will be, very handy in situations there. For Forrest Lasso, I'm upset that he is, leaving the team, but I have to say two things for Forrest Lasso leaving the team. A, I'm really glad that he's not going to one of our rivals in the league. That, I think, is super important for us. And the other thing that I have to say for Forrest Lasso is he's going to the Swedish First Division. So they're kind of on par with MLS. I think that, if the leagues merged, the American and Canadian teams would probably mostly finish above the Swedish teams, but they are pretty close in terms of player value, especially when compared to leagues above MLS and the Swedish league. So this is a first division team that he's going to. You could essentially, in my view, look at this as Forrest Lasso going for another stint in MLS. And when he's been the USL Championship Defender of the Year 2 years in a row, he's been on the USL Championship Team of the Year for, I think, 5 years running. He deserves this chance. He absolutely deserves this chance. And, I am upset that he's leaving. But if he has to go, A, really happy again that it's not to one of our rivals, and B, I can't fault him for trying this, because he absolutely deserves to have another shot in the first division somewhere. And he found a league that's pretty comparable to MLS. Good for him. I really do wish him all the best, and I really hope that everything goes well for him over in Sweden. He, has a good life. They are getting a very charismatic player and an awesome person on their team. So good for GIF Sundsvall out there, and all of the fans that they have. One other thing that I wanted to mention before I will hand it back over to Leo to discuss some very interesting scheduling news, I wanted to mention Damian Lowe. He is a former Rowdies player who left the team to go originally to Norway, and then, if I'm not mistaken, from there he moved on to have a stint in Egypt. Those were his club teams. In the meantime, though, he had really taken over one of the center back spots for the Jamaican national team, and he's been doing very well there. Apparently, he has parlayed that into a move into Major League Soccer, because he appears to be signing with Inter Miami. This is not confirmed as I am telling everybody this, but all indications online are that he is about to sign with that team. So big congratulations to Damian Lowe, another player who is really deserving of this move. I was actually, from all of the times that the U.S. had played Jamaica in World Cup qualifying, I was kind of hope that maybe he would end up back on our team, but it appears he is a little bit above the USL Championship level. And if that's the case, you know what? Good for him. I appreciate that he is another one that is getting what is due to him. And at this point, that is a chance at the Major League Soccer level. So good news and good moves for Forrest Lasso and Damian Lowe. And Leo, you have some more great news for us still in the Rowdies fan, waiting for a chance to see our boys back on the field again.
Yeah, so as James was alluding to, we have the first games of the season announced. So our first game will be away to Birmingham on Sunday, March 13th. So then that is followed by, I believe, not a full week later, but the Saturday after our first game, We are home to Indy 11. That will be on March 19th. Those are the only 2 games that have been announced so far. The rest of the schedule will be coming out. Well, for us, will be tomorrow. By the time you hear this, will probably be the same day that you're hearing this podcast. So be on the lookout for that. But yeah, it's great news. It's kind of crazy how time flies, because it still feels like the USL Championship ended almost 2-3 weeks ago, and already we're talking about the official announcements of the first 2 games of the season. But it's really exciting times, James, for you and I and all of Rowdies fans, to finally hear confirmed schedules. It makes us eager to see the boys back on the field. And I honestly can't wait. Like I said, we play away to Birmingham on Sunday, March 13th. And then we have our home opener versus Indy 11 on Saturday, March 19th.
I'm really excited about the rest of the schedule coming out. I know that, I am already going to mark my calendar out for Saturday, March 19th. And I will be looking to get my tickets as soon as they are available. And I hope that we see everybody out there, because it is another awesome season with this awesome team. And I think that after the disappointments that we dealt with in 2020 and the disappointments that the one disappointment that we dealt with in 2021, I think that there is a lot to play for. And I think that everyone on this team is going to feel more hungry possibly than they did previously when they were denied the chance to play in the USL Championship final entirely. So after 2 seasons of getting to that point and then not winning, all I can imagine is these players are going to be ready to kill to get that final trophy. So I hope that we get to see everybody out there, and I am looking forward to it. But that is all we have this week for RBLR Rowdies, and I think that it was just another great interview and some awesome news for everybody to deal with. And I want to let everybody get out of there. First, though, please follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook if you can. We always appreciate that. It helps get us in front of other people. You can follow me as well. I am mostly on Twitter at RBLR James K. Leo, where can they reach you?
You can reach me at _Leo Santos __. And as always, if you have any questions or anything like that, just use the hashtag #AskRBLR. You get to me, James, or the RBLR Sports Twitter account, and that's on any social media outlet you choose to interact on, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, as James said. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast. We're available on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Apple and Google Podcasts, even YouTube and all other major podcast platforms. So wherever you hear your podcast, we'll for sure be on there.
We will get at you next week. We don't have an interview lined up, I believe, at this point. Eureka has something lined up for the future, though, and we have a lot of really cool stuff coming out in the next couple of weeks. Going to do some NASL history, some Rowdies history, and then there are some more interviews coming up. But we will have to get to those when we get to those. In the meantime, come on, you Rowdies.
Come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.